right, so we're good. A little bit of a review from last time. We basically went over a couple of things in Rhino, right? Essentially what to do and how to start, essentially the 2-point perspective. Really the fact that we can add, and I just want to reiterate, guys, do the drawing in Rhino. Do not get lazy. Do not half-ass it in Illustrator. Mostly because it'll take you 5 times longer to draw something in Illustrator anyway. And to be fair, yes, you could technically draw in Illustrator, but good luck trying to draw exactly 5 feet when you can simply type it in Rhino. So again, just kind of be mindful. It's okay if you kind of show us just a screenshot. In most cases, especially in my class, I usually ask for a screenshot. And my computer graph is definitely a testament to that. I'll let that load in the background. Because as you can see, I make my students basically post something every single week. And we do, and we have for the last 10 weeks. But I'll let that load. But accountability is definitely important, and if you're struggling trying to just draw a line in there, right, don't do it. Now, the secret, and I was explaining this and Brandon kind of reminded me of this one a little bit, like what happens if I realize I maybe messed up in my drawing or I need to make some changes? Well, you got 2 things you can do. You can start over, but it's not really starting over. It's just going back to the drawing and trimming it and taking it back in, right? So for instance, like maybe, oh man, I didn't need those 2 lines. I'm gonna trim them and get them out of here, right? In my case, they're probably not even touching. Okay, there we go. But yeah, you know, I could do that, take the entire thing and bring it back into Illustrator, right? The second thing I can do is, well, in this case, trimming, I guess you can't really take that away. In our case, if I wanted to trim in Illustrator, that is something I guess I could technically do in Illustrator. So for instance, I'll open up one of our previous assignments and we can basically shorten a line, right? I mean, don't get me wrong, there's 2 ways to skin a cat, and I really do hate that saying, but it's absolutely true. In some cases, you can trim, quote unquote, air quotes, right? However, maybe I needed to change the entire object. I mean, don't get me wrong, we can take the entire thing and move it. However, it didn't capture every single line there. Don't get me wrong, I'm going to spend a lot of time fixing Illustrator rather than just drawing it or moving it. So for instance, I was just going to go to Rhino and just move it real quick. It's so much easier in Rhino and again, much more editable. And those lines are just bothering me now. But really the gist of the conversation that I wanted to get to was kind of just opening it up for questions if there is any. However, we talked about this last time, 2-point perspectives, a little bit about the cameras and things like that, a majority really in Rhino. So today's majority, I'd rather talk about some more Illustrator, you know, some scale figures and some other things that you have available to you. Did I mention Pimp My Drawings? I don't think I have to you guys yet, have I? I did. Did I? Okay, good. Because we definitely want them, and you can definitely import them into Rhino. I don't know if I necessarily need to go over that. It's pretty simple there. You can either drag in an AI file. It's going to say insert, import, or open. And in your case, you want to what?
Open.
Insert.
Oh, insert.
Got it wrong, Gavin. But that's good. We got it on the recording. We'll never make that mistake again. In fact, I used to have a professor that said, if you're going to make a mistake, make a big one so we can correct it. And it's okay to be wrong in school. It's not okay to be wrong in real life one day, right? Your job may very well depend on it. But in our case, I have 2 orange 24:36 ratio drawings because I'd like to talk about the final instructions. Oh, wrong class. And essentially, yeah, you guys know that I've had to reduce yours a little bit in order to make it a little bit more palatable and more effective in terms of quality. I'd rather these drawings look awesome than, oh my gosh, we have all of them and they're just trash, right? Again, keep in mind, this is for your portfolio. Yes, it's to earn a grade in Graphics 2 Summer 2025, but it is also for you. It is your portfolio, and it is what you will use to prove to the next institution that you know what you're doing. Now, you don't need to necessarily know what you're doing, but you need to be able to fake it at least a little bit, right? As Escamilla would say, fake it till you make it. right? However, a couple things, just grading rubric. Keep in mind that creative efforts is only 10% here. Don't get me wrong. I can always appreciate a lot of different creative things, such as just, unique scale figures, bird placements, entourage, colors, accent colors. So, I mean, even just in unique ways of design. For instance, Brandon, solid 10 points and sort of taking on the diagonal and the designs of those things. What could make it even better is maybe a touch of color or two, right? Accent colors, maybe to say the least. However, a majority of it is actually the craft accuracy and line weight. So that is huge, and we will be talking about that in Illustrator today. Composition is also pretty big. 20%, how is it arranged? Do these things kind of align with each other? Do they communicate well? Do they actually work with each other? For instance, I don't have one line weight in this drawing, one line weight in this drawing, another kind of line weight in this drawing. Is it consistent, right? Is it legible? Is it readable? All those different things. But again, a lot of us, especially myself included, would strive for creative efforts, even knowing that it's only 10% because, well, I'm a pretty creative person. But in that regard, some of this you should already start to have. Of course, floor plans, all 3 or 4 of them. Some of us have 4, some of us have 3. Sections, we do need 2 of them, yes. Elevations, also, if you can get 2 in there, I'm kind of saying 2 max here, but really we'd like 2. Keep in mind they do get a little bit smaller. So, and yes, I've scratched out the 1-point perspective. To be fair, that was always the one that was already kind of lacking in general. So it's been replaced with some process sketches, scanned and edited, which I went over a little bit in Photoshop as well. Curves, levels, in order to basically find that white and black point of our drawings and scans. And then lastly, we do want to add that axonometric that you guys all did so wonderfully. And maybe some of us, maybe even still making it perfect. But in our case, we will be allowing 2 pages of 24 by 36. Keep in mind that we are I'm going to eventually print probably the best 6 of them and post them somewhere in our wonderful hallway gallery space. However, they will all be turned in digitally. One thing I want to stress is that we're not going to turn them in on Miro. We're going to turn them in on Canvas. And I'll even put a message here a little bit later that says make sure you turn it in on Canvas. I'll even remind Chronodal, which is actually your substitute for next week. Specifically on Tuesday and Wednesday. Thursday is a free day because I know everybody will be darn well panicked with Studio, right, to say the very least. So the good news here is that all of this is due Monday, well out of the way, and possibly a pretty long weekend to say the very least, being that we'll be going into production mode with Studio, but then also capstoning graphics. Keep in mind, it has been reduced and you do probably already have half of it. That being said, we do need to scan our axonometric from our previous analog assignment and give it a little bit of Photoshop enhancement. What I mean by that is, again, those curves and levels. I'm not really talking about anything else. You don't necessarily have to put scale figures or really hybridized drawings or anything like that. However, there's an example from last year where, yes, the 1-point perspective actually was pretty good. And to be fair, in one elevation, they kind of copped out and said those are 2 elevations, and then, they made up for it by introducing shade and shadow back into elevation. I thought that was quite nice. But this particular student, and keep in mind I used to have it as just an exercise. Maybe I should actually bring that back because I do feel it might be a little bit confusing during the summer. I don't know, maybe keep in mind, guys, there is a student feedback, I think it's called student feedback on Canvas. I really do read those. I don't get to read them until next year anyway. But constructive criticism, don't just say you suck. Totally had that too, but that's not really helpful. I could just say it back, you suck too, right? That's not really helpful, right? What is helpful is going, I was really confused when you started going over this part, blank, right? And you don't even have to tell me how to fix it, but just letting me know actually helps me a lot. So again, if you can do those student surveys, guys, I know you're pressed for time as well, but it really does go a long way. So just kind of throwing that out there. But this is a really nice student example where we see actually them starting to blend the information. And I do think that's quite nice, and don't get me wrong, it's a really good use of the compositional white space, right? The line weight also sticks out. You almost dare I say, see this first because of how intense those shadows are. Arguably maybe too intense, but at the same time you see that it's composed. Keep in mind that this is actually a 24 by 36 butted up to a 24 by 36. Right? They put those two together and put them on the wall. That's definitely an option that you'll see, of course, in Illustrator today that we can achieve. But that being said, let's kind of fake it till we make it today and assume that we have everything done. As you can see in my tutorial, I've done minimal work, right, to say the very least. But let's just kind of ballpark it here. I'm going to assume that I was in the right size anyway. I'd want to verify those things, maybe even do a DIM and a dimension line, right, in order to see that I have 185 feet. That's definitely not correct. Keep in mind that I haven't done any of my scale changes, but if we wanted to, I could show you how to do so. For instance, I could take a line and get very close to a base point. I'm going to create a line and make it exactly 36 inches. Why? Well, that's the size of my paper, and yes, it really is about that small. So I'm going to take everything but that line, and I'm going to turn it into scale. That being said, keep in mind that I can make 4 inches equal a foot, or I can make 4 feet equal an inch, right? Hopefully you're already drawing to scale, but just in case you're not, right? Keep in mind that don't start over, don't just erase stuff. We can always size it all together. And I know I've probably gone over this before. To be fair, I've done this like 800 times literally, and have honestly lost track of how many times I've said it. But you can scale things, right? We'll take the entire thing, excluding the line that we just made. In fact, you'll even say one open curve removed from selection. Awesome, because there's no way to actually see it in the screen. So again, on the Mac it should be right here. On Windows it'll actually be right in your command bar. Good, useful information. I'm going to type in scale, not scale 1D, not scale 2D, but just scale. Once I do that, it's going to ask for a base point. My bad. Let's try that again. Take it all, remove that line, scale. Oh, I spelled scale wrong, so definitely spell scale correctly. It's going to ask for a base point, which is where those two lines intersect. And then it's going to ask, hey, what measurement do you want to make 36? In my case, I want to make the 36-inch piece of paper, and I want to make it 36 inches for real. So I'm going to find that. Oh, there it is, locks in a target, and voila, right? We have a true size 24 by 36. In fact, we can double check it again. And for some of us, you know, again, I like to verify these kinds of things just because it helps me feel better. I don't know about you, but my left brain thanks me later. But that being the case, it looks like I lost a floor plan or two. That's okay. We'll try that again. But let's compose our drawings, right? For instance, in my case, it might be drastically out of scale now. So I'm going to actually go back just for the sake of this next part of the tutorial. Again, I don't want to work so much in Rhino today. I really want to go over Illustrator because I feel like I haven't gotten to go over that one so much. Keep in mind though, I do want to compose it, right? Maybe that's my first, second, third, fourth. That'd be whack. First, second, third, fourth. First, second, third, fourth maybe. Oh, okay, that seems to work for me. Maybe I make sure that they're all aligned perfectly with each other. In fact, maybe I get a perfectly straight line and go, ooh, right? That's a little off. Don't get me wrong, a really good way of adding mistakes is to kind of like give it little errors, right? I mean, especially when it's something like alignment. However, do I have to delete this line, or could I possibly use it as a construction line? Again, keep in mind that not every line is like the same as an analog line, right? I mean, don't get me wrong, we think maybe even way too much before we make that analog line. We almost like think about it 3 times and then we make it. There is a certain amount of, what's the word? Not latency, but forgivability, right, about the digital line, because it can be brought right back, it can be deleted, brought right back, deleted, brought right back, deleted. And there's just a sense that will never happen in an analog world. Hopefully you guys are already enjoying this now. But let's say that I was done with my composition. Maybe I'm going to do a 2-point perspective down here. Maybe I even just move the frame, right? Because I don't want to sit there and select all those lines. And of course, good habits are always good. It takes 21 days to make any habit, whether it be good or bad. So make sure that you spend 21 days making a good one, right? That being said, that looks pretty sweet. But let's say I was done composing. Maybe I potentially put a title here, so I'm going to put text. Keep in mind that I use these texts actually more as like a placeholder. So like something like title, putting title, very tiny, and just kind of ballparking it for a bit. Maybe I want my title here. Okay, that seems kind of nice. Keep in mind I'm not looking for the title block. We're not making construction drawings. If anything, more or less, this would be kind of the schematic design level portion of really a project. So again, things are still pretty open to interpretation. But one thing I can't stress enough that I stressed at the beginning of the video is to do all the drawing in Rhino. Can't be stated enough. However, now that we've got this in at least a 24:36 ratio, and that is true of the rectangles that I've made here, I'm going to go ahead and file, export selected, and let's get cracking on Illustrator. So in my case, I'm just going to save it to my desktop, and we'll call it test 2 for today. And we'll make sure that it is either an AI file or a DWG. To be fair, I still use DWGs today just because, well, that's the habit that I'm kind of stuck in. And to be fair, it's only relatively recently that Adobe Illustrator got involved. But in my case, no, these are grossly out of proportion, or not out of proportion, but out of scale. But I do need to remain those proportions. So in my case, I'm going to snapshot of the current view. Not a big deal as long as I know the size of my artboards and things like this. However, in your case, you should have a fine-tuned drawing where an inch equals an inch. So again, no problems like this. In my case, I'm going to go ahead and export and go ahead and open up Illustrator. Oh, would you look at that? It's already open. Let's go ahead and close this one and go ahead and open up our project. Now what's great about this is we can do a lot of the composing and really kind of finalizing in Illustrator. Again, not necessarily the greatest drawing tool in the world, but definitely good at composing. In our case, we're going to open up that test 2, and it's going to say, hey, your text is out of date. That's fine. You can update it if you like. Honestly, just open the dang project. In our case, you may notice, holy cow, it's way too big. In fact, that's just like a little intersection point of whatever's going on there. So let's try again. In my case, I forgot one very important detail. We'll press OK. In my case, it looks like it's particularly red in this file. Oh, it's asking for the image that I had. I'm guessing that's what that image is. In my case, it doesn't look like it actually got anything. We can double check by going to select and selecting all. Right, to see and verify and make sure that there isn't really anything else in the project. In my case, it looks like it got the image, but nothing else. In fact, nothing, right? However, it could be the elusive 0 points. For instance, here is our 0 point, right? So I may very well need to move some stuff. All right, let's get this out of the way. Put it over here. And this is that little 0 space in Illustrator. So if it's not even close and it's way out here, Illustrator is defined, and of course you guys know that from the previous lectures as well. But let's go ahead and try this. And in my case, I'm going to use a DWG. It's more tried and true to me, and it allows a little bit more options when I open it. So there is a difference between them. Well, I hit the wrong thing. File, export selected, and let's choose a DWG instead. In my case, DWG, and we'll call it test 3. It's going to basically ask for lines, and yeah, there's a lot of options. Make sure you just choose a certain year, usually the lowest year, and lines. Don't choose natural, whatever that is. I still don't know what it is, but it doesn't open anything, so definitely not effective. In our case, let's try and open that model, and yes, you can open a DWG in Illustrator. I know it seems weird, it's not a part of the list. Maybe there's some other files that are not a part of the list. But one quick while we pause. Escamilla, did you have a question?
Yep.
Okay, just checking.
Sort of.
You want me to meet with you after? Or?
I've got to go. I have
Okay.
a meeting at 2, but is your interview tomorrow? What time?
11:30.
Okay. Let's talk before then.
Sure. Where was I? Okay, so let's open up that DWG and see what I meant by more options. Right, we can actually use original size. Which, do we want that? Definitely not. Ours was 182 feet, right? I don't even have enough paper, right, to even think about that. So in my case, I'm going to scale to fit artboard. And voila, it's just magically on our page because it's going to take and assume everything that's in that DWG and just place it basically on an artboard. Now what's nice is we have a 24 by 36 and we need 2 of them. So in my case, I'm going to go to File, Document Setup, and just make some artboards. In my case, I'm just going to make them off to the side real quick. Make a 24 by 36, and maybe if I do want to do something cool like, you know, put them up against each other, I could potentially do that as well. So in my case it says artboard 2, but eventually I'm going to get rid of that one. In my case at the top, I can actually control the size, as you guys know, and choose 36 by 24. And as you can see, a lot larger. So we'll zoom out a little bit. The thing that stinks about the artboards though is as soon as you move something, especially if it's locked into an artboard, it moves it with it. Like as you can see, that was great for there, but as soon as I moved that one, it was like pulling teeth. It was going to ruin my entire drawing. And it wasn't even going to say sorry. In my case, I can hold Option or Alt on Windows and simply make a copy. So that's looking pretty good, but you know, maybe I actually want it to the side. So I'm going to go ahead and move it over here. Awesome. Well, I don't need a third copy, so I'll get rid of that one, that one. Keep in mind, if you delete an artboard with stuff on it, don't, because it, oh wow, doesn't delete it now. Definitely used to do that in the past. Good to know, because that is awesome. Still there, wonderful. In our case, we do need to match those ratios, and we need to take each one of them and fill them in. So in our case, we'll take that one, grab a line. Usually I like to put it in a base, and you'll see that we get those purple lines trying to help us out. I'll hold Shift and voila, right? I'll hold Shift again for this one. Oh, zoom in a little bit, lock that in, and pretty close. Keep in mind that you do want this to be perfectly with the artboard because, well, you may very well have these things to scale. And voila, we have our composition. Now don't get me wrong, I can still do cool things like, well, I kind of want to make that like come into the page, and I can still do those kinds of things. And what's nice is Illustrator is going to automatically put that together for us, right? You'll see that there is actually a line there for us. It's not actually there, but it's essentially like acting like these 2 pieces of paper are together. Again, what's really nice about Illustrator is I don't have to draw. I can simply take all of the lines that I need. Obviously don't need purple, grayscale. Can change the size, 0.55, awesome. Again, next layer, green, definitely not red. Grayscale, ooh, maybe I want those to be a little bit thicker, 1.2 is what I'm thinking, enter. And next layer, and this is about the speed that you should go eventually in Illustrator. The lowest and the thinnest line that I can print in Illustrator is 0.125, and that seems pretty good for a construction line. However, I do want it to be actually pretty light. So I'll double click and maybe about halfway. I mean, it's already very thin. In fact, it might be so thin that I need to see it a little bit more. Maybe I want my construction layer or my construction lines to be orange. I mean, why not? I can do an accent color. However, be very sparingly with the color, right? To say the very least. It's an accent, not a feature, right? But in that case, we're starting to look pretty good, and I haven't had to do anything except click a button here and click here. In my case, I'm going to make that perspective a little bit darker and a little bit thicker. I'm going to go with like a 0.88 and call it a day, right? Keep in mind, eventually I'd want to put these things in here, but maybe I want to take that analog drawing and my axonometric and put it, of course, here, right? So I'd want to take in that image. Now, to be fair, I don't even have an axon with me, do I? I may have an axon in here somewhere, but I wouldn't count on it. Sac. Let's see if we can just drag one in for today. Oh, I know I got a bunch of files in Design 3. Or wait, Graphics 3. Or maybe it was Graphics 4. Yeah, there's a lot of stuff in Graphics 4. Spring competition. Ooh, student examples. That's always fun. Let's see what everybody else is doing. Oof. Kayak station. Obviously nothing against these students, but let's take a look at some composition, right? I mean, there is what we call stuffing the sausage, right? And what it means is, well, it's so overbearingly, there's so many things going on that it's actually hard and despairing to look at. So keep in mind, when we're composing this, guys, this may be your first time really composing a project, right? At least in a maniacal and sort of, what do you call it? Strategic way, right? Maybe this is the introduction to that, but you definitely want some white space. You want the eye to rest. You want the mind to rest a little bit in certain spots. Don't feel like you have to overdo it. In fact, make what actually fits best. Consider that the white space is actually an element to compose as well. In fact, in D1, I have a famous quote that says, when you ignore space, you've actually failed the composition, essentially. But that being the case, maybe I do want them to work in tandem, so I am stretching it and using my construction lines, of course, to maybe bring that in, or again, maybe kind of mend them together in a unique way. I'm also allowing the floor plan to maybe direct that. Maybe I start at the bottom, I go up, I go this way, and it makes me come back around. So again, starting to think about how these are viewed is the next step in what we do in architecture, because, well, maybe nobody told you this yet, but eventually you got to sell these, and if they don't sell, do you make money? What happens if you don't sell something and you're a business owner? You go out of business, right? And there's 12 other architects who want the same job. What if their marketing is that much better? Now, I'm not saying like start using propaganda and lying, but what I am saying is that we can use a lot to communicate a drawing. The first being composition and the way that we compose actually those isolated drawings on it. So that being said, we could also change the line weights and we can add some scale figures, which I hear that I've already done. So I guess I won't cover that again. My bad. I just kind of forgetting there. In fact, I may leave the rest of the time, which is about 15 minutes, really just open to questions, whether that be Illustrator or Rhinoceros. But that being the case, let me just make sure I went over everything that I wanted to go over. Obviously, shade and shadow is not required. However, you could definitely use your skills. In fact, all you'd have to do is, well, basically push it off this way and realize you can calculate actually lots of shadows and things based on those two principles, the bottom point, the top point, and of course using them, really realizing that they work not only in an axonometric, but they work in an isometric, they work in a plan view, they work in an elevation, they work just in any orthographical projection you can think of. However, we need some scale figures in this guy, to say the very least. But looking pretty good for today, and really hopefully answer some questions of what is needed and expected by next Monday. But that being said, I did conclude in at least that everything that I wanted to go over. I guess some more tips and tricks in Illustrator though. We can do some pretty special things. So one thing I did want to mention, at least in terms of being able to draw, maybe those last minute things. I mean, don't get me wrong, nobody wants to go all the way back to Rhino just to add the section lines that they forgot, right? However, you should just go back because you probably forgot more things anyway. But you know, my line weights are looking pretty good. I may realize that, oh man, I forgot to poche inside of this. What do I do? Well, to answer that, you're gonna need a new layer. In fact, I'm gonna call this the pin fix layer. And I'm gonna put it at the top. Why? Because I said so. Anyway, in this case, you'll see that I locked every other layer, and I'm gonna use my pen tool. This is actually what makes drawing in Illustrator so effing difficult, is because as soon as you draw on another line, it wants to be smart and help you, and unfortunately does not, and starts to turn these lines into each other. It starts to mess with the line weight, and it's a whole dang mess. But that being the case, adding a section line shouldn't be too difficult, nor adding poche to a certain element. Now, no, I can't just click inside of here and it's gonna magically fill. If I did want to do that, I'd have to use live paint. If I do that, it's going to change the line weight and opacity. Again, Illustrator is not your best friend for drawing. But if we did, emergency cases only, I would say use the pen tool. I'm going to hit the letter P for pen tool, and you'll see that it has a few tools in here, such as our basic one pen tool, adding anchor points, deleting anchor points, and to be absolutely honest with you, I've never used this tool in my life. Still don't know what it does to this day. And to be fair, you're going to run into a few things like that in these programs, but I digress. Let's use our pin tool. Let's make sure these are locked. I don't even want to show you what happens when you don't lock it. But in our case, we're going to use this basically as a template. So in my case, I'm going to make sure that it's kind of in a fill. And that way I don't actually cover everything so I can actually see it. I'm going to put it at 50% for now. In my case, I basically just need to trace the drawing. Now don't get me wrong, this one's pretty simple. It's just like a simple U or C shape. And as you can see, it's already inaccurate. You guys see what's going on there? It's like trying, but as you can see, it's not as accurate as like OSNAP or anything like that. But it's taken me a good few minutes, right? Arguably about the same amount of time as going back to Rhino and changing layers and things like this, but I get it. I was a student once too. We'll complete the line, and keep in mind that we can still, change these things. But in our case, I'm going to switch it up and maybe switch that to like a grayscale. Keep in mind, I always know that it prints way darker than it looks on the screen, so I often actually use something quite light. However, look what it's done to the rest of our lines. Bumpkus, right? Obviously, in our case, it's because of the layering as well. So maybe that it goes on the bottom layer. Still a little out of whack. But like I said, drawing in Illustrator is difficult. Now, here's the funny part. If you want to edit it, what do? Well, I can't just click on it. I can't just click on the point either. It's very annoying, right? Especially compared to Rhino and what I'm used to. In our case, you have to use a completely different tool called Direct Selection. And when you do that, yes, now you arguably still can't. You have to double click on it. It's the weirdest thing. I do not understand drawing in Illustrator. And funny enough, we actually had this case, that same professor at Texas Tech that ripped my drawing off the wall. He did the same thing to a student who drew his entire floor plans in Illustrator. And he knew that he drew it in Illustrator. How? Because of how inaccurate the drawing was, right? He was looking for things like this, and he could tell a mile away. Well, not a mile away, but don't get me wrong, it can save your life in that 30 seconds or so, right? Give or take, to say the very least. However, I would never start getting my straight section line and start to just sit here and ballpark it. No, definitely not, right? Because, well, you're just going to sit here forever, and it's not even going to look good. Again, if I catch you drawing in Illustrator, I will tell you to stop, so don't do it. Anyway, that being the case, there is the second option that I forgot to go over, just in case you run into something. So, for instance, like maybe I forgot a pole in here. Oh, crap. Maybe it's like the entire structural system I forgot, and maybe I do need to actually transfer that over. There's not a situation where I can use the pen tool to basically fix that. So, just one last thing. Well, again, draw the rest of it here. Let's assume that was the case, so I'm just going to kind of fake it till I make it real quick and say that I forgot my structure. And say that there's a bunch of circle columns that I forgot. So for instance, let's say that's my circle column. I'm going to go ahead and copy it. Let's say that there's 4 of them. Oh, I forgot them on every single plan, so I'm going to take each of those, get rid of that one. Oh. I'm going to hold shift to add to my selection and copy that to each one. Again, so much easier in Illustrator. In Rhino. In order to basically make changes like that are big like that, right? I mean, that's a pretty big one. If you're missing the structure in your drawing, like just go back. Like you're not saving any time by trying to draw it in Illustrator. But that being the case, what do I do here? Do I take the whole thing back in? Nah, why would I do that? I would have to do all the line weights again. I just need that component that I was adding. So in my case, I'm gonna turn everything off that I don't need, right? In my case, a lot. So let's get all those pieces. And also in my case, well, I need some stuff to line up to. So we'll take that piece. I'll unclick that piece. I don't know why it doesn't want to unclick that. Get out of here. Copy. Well, I don't want to copy it. I want to export selected, but just those pieces that I needed. So in my case, I'm going to export selected. And say those pieces I forgot. Awesome. I'm going to make sure it's in DWG. Sweet. I'm even going to open it as a separate file. Why? Well, I want to dial in some things first. Those pieces I forgot. Yeah, definitely the correct title, right? No, don't open it up in Rhino. What am I doing? Sorry, wrong program. File, open, make sure you're in Illustrator. Those pieces I forgot. I'm going to scale to fit artboard because, well, it should be a 24 by 36. And it got pretty close. Let's fix it. File, document setup, edit artboards. In my case, let's change that to a 24 by 36, 36 and 24. Sweet. Click on the outside of the screen, you're golden. We'll take that piece and put it here. A little bit of extra work, but let's face it, I don't have to do the line weights, and I may have done 124 different layers of line weight, so I definitely don't want to do that again. But instead, I'm going to actually fix things here. Obviously, change the orange. Let's go with that poche that we wanted, and obviously maybe a nice outline for those, right? Let's, of course, double check. Oh, doesn't look like it got everything. Ooh, a circle is not actually a circle, is it? Ooh, it's a bunch of lines. Again, another reason why I say do not draw in Illustrator. And also to answer Brandon's question, kind of the reason why we can't go back to Rhino is because, well, not really the same lines anymore, to say the least. But that being the case, let's say that was done. Now let's get it back into my file. I'm going to basically take the exact same size thing. I'm going to Command C or copy, right? I'm going to go to my file and paste it right in there. Of course, line it up correctly. Oh, don't do that. But in our case, we need to match that in, and voila, we've added. All right, so again, we didn't necessarily have to start over, but again, there's something to be said that it's up to you in deciphering the situation and what might be best for what you need to do, right? So for instance, maybe it's something important like the structure. Maybe it's something not important so much as, well, I can simply add some poche to a certain level. But that being said, I kind of want to show you what you don't want to happen, just a little bit. So for instance, let's say these are all unlocked, and I want to do this cool thing that I saw on YouTube called Live Paint. Well, Live Paint's cool, but just not so much for architecture. You'll go to Object, right? You'll go to Live Paint, and you'll type make, right? And it'll basically turn it all into one object. Well, that's awesome, but I lost all my layers, just like that. So don't get me wrong, I could do maybe Live Paint at a certain portion, maybe after I'm already done with all the line weight. But Live Paint, yeah, it doesn't always work either, right? Keep in mind, some of these, they're like thousands of lines for that circle rather than just a circle. So in our case, let's try that again, Live Paint, and yeah, it should be working actually. It won't let me do it. Let's go to the Live Paint tool just to make sure. Live Paint bucket. Sweet. And as you can see, it's trying, but no cookie. Maybe it's because I have the wrong color going on. There we go. And that's pretty sweet, but you'll notice that it got rid of actually my line weights. Oh no. In fact, it even made them the same color as the poche. Right? Another uh-oh. Right? But again, Live Paint can save someone some time. So did want to introduce that as well. However, very simply, one of my favorite videos that I know that I've put on the Miro page is these three. Gotta tell you, has anybody watched these yet? You need to. You really do. Because honestly, I'm not a YouTuber. And some people do this stuff professionally where they literally call out the keys that they're strategically on. They have an actual project that they're maybe working on in these kinds of situations. But definitely useful. I didn't just put them there for my health, guys. Anyway, that being said, now you may totally ask some questions, whether it be Illustrator or Rhinoceros. I'll leave the floor open a little bit. Any at all, guys.
Mr. Gray, I have a question.
What do you got?
If we have like two sections, we have to put a two-section cut lines on. Like, I don't understand the.
Correct.
Right. So just. Oh.
Good question. The question was, if I have two sections, do I need two section lines? The correct answer is yes. Keep in mind that you could do a section where you cut this way, you can do another section cutting the same way. That might actually save you a lot of time, right? Getting basically another copy of the finished section that you have, and of course reducing it based on, say, the new level or place that it's at, right? Elevation, finish one of them, copy it, and then align it to another portion of your floor plan, right? You do not have to reinvent the wheel here, right? Another thing that could be said is you could start with the floor plan and derive lines out, right? Of course, construction lines. I see some questions in the minds over here. Brandon, it looked like you had your hand up first.
Yeah, so say if we were to make a 3D model, how would we get a section?
Awesome. Yeah, if you wanted to get a section of a 3D model, even though this won't pertain to really anybody except maybe Isaiah and Brandon who are making a three-dimensional model, let's go ahead and show you what you would do. It's called clipping plane, but let's say I have a box. Oh, a box. There we go. And let's go ahead and make that box shaded so you can actually see it. Let's say this was my architectural model. I'd use clipping plane, enter. And in my case, it's going to start off at, say, a level plane. And when I move it, it's even going to show me the section of that cut. It's even got the little arrows for my section cut. In fact, that's what I mean when I say this is actually a floor plan. A floor plan is a section cut, just reoriented. Whereas now if I want a section cut, boom, now I've got a section cut. Now to be fair, there's not a lot going on with a cube, right? At least so far. But that being the case, well, if I want to make 2D of that situation, I'll need to go to that view and find the make 2D or the correct orientation that I want. You may notice, well, in our case, let's go to a different project so you can actually see something. I've got some random stairs somewhere, right? Let's open that one. Oh, this could be dangerous. That one could be really old. Did I mention I've been teaching this class too long? Well, we'll give it a second to open it up. It is a good question though. However, you'll see with clipping plane, Brandon, that it also has a properties, right? So if you go to, oh, there we go. There we go. Something a little bit more noticeable in terms of a cut. But this is quite frankly what we do in computer graphics. We do all kinds of stuff. But let's get a shaded model in there, and let's do some clipping planing at least to this model right here. So I'm going to go ahead and hide that stuff. Fair enough. But let's say I did need a section of this, right? So I'd use a clipping plane. You always have to draw it at the bottom first, at least in that planar view, and then you can always rotate it. But as I was mentioning, as you can see, much more relevant now. Wow, that would have been a game changer, right? I can make an instant section. So let's say I need to get a section through that ramp view. Awesome. And I want to just get through the rest of it. I need to find that view, whether it be the right side or the left side. In fact, I might even have to change the set view to, say, another side, say like the left side. Awesome. However, you may actually also realize that the clipping plane has, I don't know why the top view's there. Anyway, you can always change these views. I like to keep my perspective here and switch this back to the top. Anyway. But you'll realize sometimes the cut doesn't happen. You're like, wait, I totally cut through that, but it's not cutting, sir. Right? Oh, why isn't it doing anything into that view? Well, the clipping plane also has some properties. So if we go to the properties, you'll notice that, well, I need to check this view and that view in order for it to happen. You see that? I usually just by default put them all on, right? That way, of course, that I can see it. Once I'm from here, make 2D, section. Just like that. Nope, let's center that up a little bit. But as you can see, a section on the ground, right? Now, don't get me wrong, I still need to fix some things, layer them up, and maybe even start to make line weights and things like this. But it's a pretty good base for somebody, you know, with 11 by 17 and just trying to make a section real quick. Helpful? Good question. Any others, guys? Not particularly with modeling or anything, but anything coming to mind? Let's get rid of that for today. Yes, ma'am. Hold shift. Hold shift and do the right click. Then it'll pan. You still have to use your right click. There you go. Ta-da!
Like for example, like a key command for like the copy command, like the key shortcut for the copy command. Is there any way to do that?
I usually just type in copy.
Yeah, but I just want to be able to like just click it on my my keyboard.
You can do Command C
Like,
and Command V. You can still do those like copy and paste. The only thing that stinks about that is it randomly puts your cursor to just the middle of whatever you selected, which is sometimes okay, but sometimes like not what I needed to copy. Unfortunately, I don't know of a way where, I mean, don't get me wrong, you can change the settings in Rhino to like be whatever you want. You could type in butt and it'll copy or something, you know. So I mean, it is very customizable, but be very careful because in some cases you'll say like, I just want to press the letter C to copy and not realize that that's already taken by circle. Okay, well, I'm going to put it to copy. Now I have to replace circle with CI, or you know what I mean? You start to, you know, kind of mix things around. Another thing is I would say, do it on your personal computer. Please don't do it to the school computer because it's kind of hard for the next guy to change it. And then say he or she was used to typing in copy, they'll type in C and suddenly circle will come out, you know, like it can get very confusing. I usually just sit there and restart them anyway, but yeah, do it on your personal computer.
yes.
But yes, you can make Rhino very customizable. Absolutely.
Ahmed would always like message me like, yeah, we'll get back to y'all with that, and he never did. So it always just stayed at the back of my mind. Like I wonder how to do like the shortcut.
Yeah, and I can actually point it out, at least on the Mac. You'll find that there's two Mac settings, right? There's one actually in the Rhino 8. There's like basic settings, which is where you're going to find it. So like display modes, you can change a lot of things here. Another thing that you can change, I think it's actually in general. Never repeat these commands. So like there's just so many customizable things you can do. I'm trying to look for the particular one that you want though. Or it's like the actual commands. There is a way though. To be fair, I just don't know where it is right now either. It might be in advanced. And this is what I mean by like everything in Rhino is customizable. Be very careful about this thing, by the way. This is every single bit of code for this program. And you can like make stuff true, you can make stuff false. Be very careful. Don't just like randomly click stuff in here. But for instance, if I type in copy, we can see what's actually causing the copy. All right, so copy to previous Rhino version, not exactly what we're looking for. So maybe it's like a command-based thing. And to be fair, we could probably, in my case, I'd ChatGPT this too, like what the heck does that mean? Because this is more akin to like regedit. Like if you've had a Windows computer before, you can register, edit your stuff, and you can brick your computer very easily. Same thing can be said about Rhino 8 in that case. But there are second options that you might find it as well in File, Settings. They're both called Settings. And this one has a multitude of options as well. Actually much more retaining to the graphic file. You'll notice that it even like says the file. And what's cool is one controls the settings of all of Rhino. This one just controls the settings of that file. Does that make sense? So those settings, like, you're like, why do they have two settings? Well, here's your answer. One is controlling universally everything, and one is just controlling the file. So definitely kind of nice and to be aware of. To be absolutely honest, I didn't know that until about 2 years ago. But that being said, again, there's a lot of things that we can change, particularly in this file, such as like, I mean, shoot, if we want to load some hatches, awesome, right? And you can actually get free hatches and things like this. But you'll notice that like colors or the UI, the user interface, there's definitely no options there because that's more of a universal setting. So again, hopefully helpful, right? Good question.
Or do you know how like in the Windows you right click and it does the last setting? On Windows it does that, right?
Yeah, I think if you wanted to do that in Rhino, you have to go to your mouse settings because you can actually, like for instance, you could tell your middle button to be the copy. You could just be like copy, 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 copy. I mean, I've seen people do that, and especially like those really crazy mouse where it's like a whole keypad and stuff like that. People do some awesome customization with those things. Absolutely. Great questions, guys. Any else?
Yeah, Brett, I have a question.
Yep.
Damn, I think I just lost my train of thought.
That's why you gotta write stuff down.
Damn, yeah, I forgot. Oh,
Dang
wait.
it. Oh,
I remember it.
we're back.
Like, I was gonna put some railing here. Should I add like a thickness or just make it?
Give it some thickness, man.
Give it some. Alright.
Just because we can.
Yeah. Alright.
So offset it. If you already have a line there, offset it by what? An inch?
Yeah. To add some thickness.
Absolutely.
You think I should just do that for the railing or both the railing and the post? Or I guess I can
I
make
think
the
it's up to
post
you.
Smaller.
But keep in mind, you only have to make one baluster, right?
Oh,
Got
it's
it.
just concrete.
I'm going to assume that's all the questions for today. I'll go ahead and end the video. Is that okay? All right.